Our next presenter is Konstantinos Avramidis, who's coming all the way from Cyprus. But welcome, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Thomas. First off, I would like to congratulate and thank you guys, all the organizing committee, for the fantastic, exemplar organization of the event. I'm thrilled and honored to be among, as someone else said, drawing heroes, drawing practitioners who are our heroes and our role models, and also being surrounded by all these beautiful drawings. And it's also really fun to see some familiar faces, some old friends and mentors after several years, and also meeting new people with such a passion in drawing. I'll start with a warning. The presentation has a lot of documentation, so be prepared, and indexing. And also, the work is all about the sites of the writings or the graffiti you like. So there's a need for a lot of contextualization, which of course cannot happen due to the limitations, time limitations. But so a bit will be missed. Let's hope it won't be that much. So orthographic drawings are primarily being used instrumentally. They usually present a single fixed reality devoid of any potential or existing inhabitants. But we know from Robin Evans that drawings are not mere generators of buildings, and that their projective nature can be reversed. So neither drawings nor buildings should be considered as final end products. Here I'm also echoing Federica Goffi. So this conceptualization allows us to bring the traces of the lived experience back into the drawing. So this presentation addresses drawing through a specific practice of occupying architecture illicitly, graffiti. My interests come from my own experience as a graffiti practitioner since the late 90s. So the presentation transfers the transgressive nature of graffiti to architectural representation in order to question drawing's imagined neutrality, objectivity, and truth, aiming to transform it into a tool of inquiry. It introduces the concept of the graffiti architect, one that by drawing transgression aims or hopes to reveal the potential of transgressing drawing. So I'll focus on a series of photographic drawings documenting 3 graffitied sites in Athens that were produced in the context of my by design doctoral thesis entitled An Atlas of Athenian Inscription, a book of drawings of writings and writings on drawings, parts of which you're looking on your screen for the past few minutes. I won't discuss the physical object, which is, again, another animal, so I'll focus mainly on the drawings. So 3 situations are studied here, all in Athens city center, and reflect 3 important historical periods in local political history, and they are emblematic in that they are the epicenters of historical ruptures during which they are extensively graffitied. So 1, the former Nazi detention center, which operates during the Axis occupation, i.e. early 40s. The second one is the Athens Polytechnic, or currently the School of Architecture, which plays a pivotal role in the student uprising against the Greek military junta. I'm talking about the early 70s. And the Bank of Greece headquarters building, which is a site of recurring political expression in contemporary crisis. I'm talking about the 2010s here. So the study traverses a wide spectrum of scales, from the surface to the building to the urban landscape. And these scales correspond to different series of drawings that I name as the writing gestures, the physical texts, and the urban context, respectively. I'll focus primarily on the two on top. All the drawings, regardless of their scale, challenge the distinction between the real and the potential at the city, building, and surface level. So I won't discuss the context maps, these guys, because this will require to dive in more detail with the context and everything. So I'll focus on the text series of drawings, and at the end I will briefly discuss the gesture drawings. So in this series, every found inscription of each site is documented adapting an appropriate empirical technique. I document graffiti in two parallel ways: by digitally retracing them, as you see on the top, and or by directly inserting graffiti photographs in the drawings, as you see at the bottom. Ray Lucas from Manchester School of Architecture, who is echoing Tim Ingold, in his study of the discipline of tracing in architectural drawing, argues that the traced drawings are not mere replicates, but reperformances of an original, opening up opportunities for knowledge production. Copying enabled by tracing, according to Lucas, and I quote, not only does introduce inaccuracy, but it also allows it, end of quote. In a sense, these elevations and sections that I will show function primarily as maps for the situation and serialization of graffiti marks. So before moving to the drawings, we've already did slightly, but yeah, that was a spoiler. Please allow me to briefly discuss how I understand transgression here. So transgression is defined as an act that goes against a law, rule, or code of conduct, or it's an offense. Building upon Murray Douglas' oft-cited theorization of dirt as a matter out of place, geographer Tim Creswell, in his book on geography, ideology, and transgression, the cover of which is adorned with a graffito, unsurprisingly, argues that graffiti is an example of transgression due to its placement where it shouldn't be and doesn't belong. He also believes that it's an act of, a paradigmatic act of what he terms heretical geographies. That is, geographies and actions that upset our expectations. So in a way, they question the taken for granted. I'm using exactly this taking for grantedness of architectural drawing to explore what the conventional modes can reveal about spaces, practices, and modes of inhabitation, whilst contemplating on what the errors or inaccuracies have to offer regarding the relationship between drawing and reality. So I'll move quickly to the situations. So the first one, the arid shelter of the National Assurance Company building was turned into a detention center when the edifice was occupied by the Nazis in 1941. It develops in 2 levels, 6 meters below the ground, and has 4 rooms on the upper level and 3 at the lower, the walls of which are covered with numerous well-preserved graffiti written by the inmates. Their names and addresses, poems and songs, familiar landscapes, and everyday life scenes all coexist on the same surfaces. I initially here used conventional sections to draw the spaces, but it quickly became obvious that the sections could neither show all the walls nor communicate the sense of confinement in its space. So this restriction led me to draw each room separately and represent it as an interior panorama. And the drawings will make one wonder whether the writings aim to transform the interior surfaces of each room into panoramic decorative wallpapers. Of course, wallpaper panoramas are made of vivid colors and depict natural landscapes in a very realistic manner to give an illusion of the outside world. But I felt, after reflecting on the drawings, that the inscriptions were attempting somehow, they were serving a similar purpose. They're attempting to bring the outside world inside and cancel the very nature of the walls. Further, in order to study the content of the inscriptions, I transformed my photographic studies, which you see in the middle, into texts that you see at the bottom. So these concrete, kind of like concrete poems, allowed me to digitally search for each individual name of the inmates and started revealing associations primarily within each room and sometimes across all the rooms. And in a sense, it revealed a hidden choreography of movements. These recurring texts suggest peripatetic experience in each room and have constant reference to the outside world as well. And when one connects the dots with these yellow lines that you see, a sort of celestial atlas reveals itself. It is as if the movements in place represent the passing in time in the cell. So situation 2, the Athens Polytechnic, which is a monumental neoclassical building erected in 1872. Yet it is primarily known as the epicenter of the 1973 student uprising that led a few months later to the end of the 7-year-long military junta in Greece. So in order to document the graffiti in this case, I've chosen to produce a series of photomontages showing how the planned, the line drawing, and the unplanned, the historical graffiti photographs meet and disrupt each other. So the writings here come from all the 3 historical eras and are placed directly to the line drawing. Polytechnic's drawings disturb one's expectations because they convey a Beaux-Arts building in a non-Beaux-Arts way. Given that Beaux-Arts drawings are expected to be realistic, these drawings appear incomplete because they are only partially covered with fragments of diverse past realities, sort of a drawing with photographic spolia, if you like. As much as graffiti pose the threat to the clinical environment of the junta, so do the graffiti photographs to the clean and order environment of the drawing. So graffiti infuse contingency and action to the seemingly immobile and inactive line drawing. By deploying these techniques, my aim here is to transfer the essence of the Polytechnic's multi-temporal walls to the drawings, so the writings of different epochs inhabit, affect, and disrupt each other. And in a sense, the drawing becomes like a tableau akin to Warburg's Mnemosine Atlas, which allows different affinities to be created. Situation 3, and we're nearly there-ish. So the Bank of Greece is the cathedral of capitalism and finance in Greece, and according to prominent historian of Greek architecture, Dimitris Philippidis, an account, the Bank of Greece imitates that of the Greek Parliament, which was designed approximately a century earlier. And that is to say that graffitiing the Bank of Greece might be equated to graffitiing the Greek Parliament, which actually happened a few years ago. In order to make sense of these marks, which are mainly anti-authoritarian and capitalist and crisis-related, I focus on the ways they are spatially serialized and temporally sequenced. And to do so, the drawings here consist of map elevations upon which each graffiti is positioned and a series of record cards, sort of an archaeological record of the surface that spanned from 2010 to 2015. So the collected graffiti is ordered in 13 sets, which are groups of writing before their removal. Interestingly, despite the large number of writings that I managed to collect, 90, the Bank of Greece constantly looks untouched from crisis. The elevation drawings that we saw earlier show exactly the opposite, because by superimposing all the writing layers, the drawings record what once was and disclose what it could have been if no removal practices had taken place. So through these repetitive interventions, the once offensive image of the bank, at least for the graffitis, becomes an offensive image for the institution, if you like. So fire, right? It's okay. I've also produced a series of one-to-one scaled drawings in order to explore the different conditions of characteristic surfaces in each site. And the drawings suggest distinct graphic systems as characteristic to each situation. So hieroglyphic, palimpsestic, and iconoclastic for the detention center, the Athens Polytechnic, and the Bank of Greece, respectively. So this is a photograph from a portion of the surface at the Nazi detention center. And so the hieroglyphic here is concerned with the peculiar adjacency between images and texts that graffiti suggests. And the graffitied wall starts appearing as a natural landscape when it's being redrawn, making it possible to separate the material substrate of writing from the text. The palimpsestic is composed by the overlay of writings of different historical and political eras, such as the 40s, the 70s, and the 10s, underline the contamination of each other, whilst also considering writing and removal as similar gestures. Lastly, the iconoclastic explores how competing or seemingly competing agents, namely the graffiti writers and the buffers, or if you like the official and the unofficial, rhythmically meet on the architectural surface to negotiate power over the image of the city, and in the process affirm the often hidden multivocal and multitemporal character of the surface. So I'll have to run. So the transgressive manner through which drawing techniques are used here, in that they represent architecture retrospectively and document graffiti, which is something that's not normally surveyed, challenges the orthodoxy of orthographic drawings, and the drawing techniques also adapted here also allow inaccuracy. And in these error moments, which are primarily present in this occasion, there's something meaningful that has to do with the inability of technologizing and measuring reality that creates this lack of coincidence. The graffiti on the drawings makes them very disturbing for the architect, for sure, who by definition seeks for precision and wishes to capture the ideal, pristine building. So in the drawings, what we're constantly getting is a kind of tension between the empirical system of measure and this sort of would-be reality that we get to understand through it. So by challenging this taking for granted reality of the drawing exposes the virtuality of the reality, really, if that makes sense. What I'm doing, in a sense, is in the process a kind of, on the one hand, conformity, because I'm using consensual architectural means to represent graffiti, and at the other hand, radicality, because I'm dissenting against the very means by graffitiing my own drawings. So effectively, the aim of testing the multiple systems of enacting survey drawing is to transgress documentation and transform it into exploration and eventually interpretation. So this becomes sort of compositional survey drawings, if that can be said. And last sentence, if I may. These survey methods allows us to appreciate the critical potency embedded in our conventional modes of drawing, whilst becoming sort of graffiti architects, transgressing our disciplinary boundaries by challenging what is shown and how it is shown, embracing multivocality, transferring agency to the other voices, and allowing openness to the process of drawing. And I would like to thank you very much for your attention. I hope it wasn't too long.
I have one for you. I'm puzzled a little bit by the almost like the forensic quality of your work, and because the events are known and you're documented and you're presenting the event first and then sort of leading back to it in a way with the text. But at the end, and I think that this question has been asked multiple times today, like what happens, like do you fold it back? I'm wondering if there's maybe the word is not forensic, but if there's a spatial quality that you attribute to those once the building disappears, and you're left with what you call the survey, or at least either the materiality of the graffiti or the text or c'est bon, on m'entend? Okay. Or for example, the names along the line. Like, do you still see the link between that and a kind of a spatial possibility, or at that point it ends, or you come back? Does that make sense? Or?
I mean, what do you mean by spatial possibility for?
Well, because like when they're together, it seems like one of the proposition is that it is all, and it's more apparent in the final drawing that you show with the materiality starts to blend, but that the architecture is all of it together. Like, but once you take out the architecture, the building, and you're left with the words, do the words themselves tell a story about the event that like just disregards the architecture? Is there a spatial link?
Definitely. I mean, it's actually there's would say a parasitic relationship there. So the graffiti cannot exist without the architecture, right? So, and in a sense, architecture dictates the speciality, at least, of the graffiti. Apart from, and also invites particular responses. So it's not accidental that the Bank of particular bits of the Bank of Greece are being targeted. It's because the agents want to give to their audience, the mediatized audience, because all these images are being circulated online after demonstration and so on and so forth, to give to their global audience a sense of the context. So definitely there's a special, intrinsic spatial relationship. And going back to the forensic bit, definitely there's a forensic element there. In fact, going back to the tracing of the movements that I was trying to do, and the animation of the movement, I actually used bloodstain pattern analysis to understand how the paint has been casted or thrown on the back of Greece, and in a sense see the actual movement in front of it, and reconstruct it. But yeah, this makes sense.
I'm going. There's Mark that has it, but like while I'm moving towards Mark, there's a much simpler way of framing or like saying the question. I think is that what if you started with the graffiti? Like, what would you draw? Like, can you reconstruct the thing without that there's a backwards movement towards, an architecture only from the graffiti itself, without knowing that the building looks like this first?
I see. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I wonder if you know this short documentary film called The Subconscious Art of Graffiti Removal.
Yeah.
Which seems like you make the documentary of the graffiti on the building, and then this film continues the story on the other side.
Sure.
Yeah. For those who don't know, it is a film where the filmmakers they take the role of art critics, and they're interviewing the workers whose job it is to remove graffiti from buildings, and they treat the workers in their conversation as if they're artists, and try to have a conversation with them as a group.
I mean, it's fascinating because it begins by because we often see and we don't even consider them as art, but all these buffings, all these removals or painting over the graffiti create a sort of really interesting patchworks which start looking like abstract compositions that could have been from a modernist artist or whatever. And yeah, it's a really, really interesting documentary film. It's also really nice music at the very beginning as well.
That's good. No, sorry. All right. Thank you very much, Konstantinos.